Hey there, my name's Curtis Lucas and you're watching Empire Building. In this episode, I need to address something that I came across on Twitter from the Twitter account of Senator Elizabeth Warren. She had a message to send to the cryptocurrency community. And with all of the talk around Bitcoin's energy consumption and all these various concerns that have been raised by, let's face it, people less informed on the matter. We're going to listen to what she and others had to say in this video and address some of those comments head on. But before we do get on with that, I do want to remind everyone there is a link down in the description for 2 free stocks from Webull. Click the link and follow the instructions and you can get 2 free stocks.
We've talked a lot today about the dangers that cryptocurrencies pose to our economy. We've talked about the ripoffs, the instability, the extent to which they're used to help criminals with cyber attacks, like the attack on Colonial Pipeline and JBS. But there's another piece too, the adverse environmental impacts of the computing activity used to mint many of these digital currencies in the first place. Bitcoin consumes more energy than entire countries, and it is projected to consume as much energy as all the data centers in the whole world this year. One Bitcoin transaction, a single purchase, sale, or transfer, uses the same amount of electricity as the typical US household uses in more than a month. So, yeah. So, Dr.
Can you say that again?
Yep. A single Bitcoin transaction, that's one purchase or one sale or one transfer, uses the same amount of electricity as the typical US household uses in more than a month. I think the estimate is 53 days.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Now, obviously, I've covered this before. Bitcoin does not consume energy to process transactions. Bitcoin's energy consumption is correlated to the security or the hash rate on the network, which has nothing to do with processing transactions. But now that she's brought it up, let's actually dive into that. I've checked the math, and depending on what assumptions you make in terms of Bitcoin's average number of transactions per day, and if you're measuring that based on the maximum amount of power that Bitcoin has actually reached on its network, then that number, when measured in that way, is not that far off. However, she's completely forgot to acknowledge the fact that not all Bitcoin transactions are created equal. Many of those transactions are Lightning Network transactions. And in a Lightning Network transaction, there can be any number of individual transactions. And as these type of second layer solutions begin to be developed, there is no limit to how high or how great that can scale. But obviously the main point to be made here, the main point to understand, is that energy consumption has nothing whatsoever to do with transaction volume. Bitcoin can process empty blocks or full blocks. It will consume the same amount of electricity solely based on the amount of hash power on the network. And the point of that hash power is not to process transactions, but to secure the network. Now, I have more to say when it comes to the concept of network security, but we're going to get into that later on in this video.
So, Dr. Narula, could you explain why cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin eat up so much energy?
Certainly, Senator Warren. What I think it's important to note here is that, at least from a computer science perspective, Bitcoin was doing something that we had never done before, which was building a system that was secure enough to support a massive currency and at the same time allow anyone to participate. The technique that the creator of Bitcoin used in order to do that, Satoshi Nakamoto, was what we refer to as mining or proof of work. And the idea is that the participants in the Bitcoin network protocol, because we don't necessarily know who they are and we want to make the protocol open for anyone to join, without being able to flood the system with copies of a person, for example, is that they prove who they are by contributing compute power. So the way that Bitcoin works is that in order to build the next block on the blockchain, the participants in the network compete to solve a puzzle. It's a very, very difficult puzzle to solve at the moment. And in fact, the puzzle difficulty changes depending upon how many participants there are in the network. What that has led to, as the price of Bitcoin has gone up, is more and more resources being brought to bear, more and more compute resources being brought to bear to solve this puzzle. And as a result, that has used quite a bit more energy. That is also how the blockchain is secured. The idea is that once these participants have expended this energy and expended this compute power, in order to rewrite the blockchain, in order to change history, one would have to expend an equivalent amount of power and energy. So it's a pretty fundamental part of the underlying security of Bitcoin.
So it's built right into it that there are computers all over the world right now spitting out random numbers around the clock in a competition to try to solve a useless puzzle.
A useless puzzle. And here all this time I thought it was a proof of work system that secures a worldwide monetary network based on the assumption that the participants in that network would be self-serving. This is part of the problem I have when a very technical person attempts to explain a very complex idea to a lay person. Now, there is nothing technically wrong with the explanation that this woman provided to Senator Elizabeth Warren. That is how proof of work functions. But it does not communicate the purpose of that proof of work in a way that someone like Elizabeth Warren could understand. Bitcoin's proof of work consensus algorithm is an ingenious piece of computer code. You'll hear all over the place that blockchain is the groundbreaking technology behind Bitcoin. Well, the truth is blockchain technology is only a technology behind Bitcoin, and it's not even the most impressive one. The most impressive aspects of Bitcoin is the way in which game theory is applied to its protocol, reinforces its protocol, reinforces its security. The environment that Bitcoin operates in requires that human beings will act in their own best interest, which of course we know human beings always will. And this is the fundamental aspect of Bitcoin that everyone must understand. This is what guarantees its success more likely than not. The fact that human beings are self-serving is what reinforces and secures the Bitcoin protocol. In my opinion, it goes way deeper than that, but we'll get into that another time. The point is that these puzzles that these participants are attempting to solve ensures that they won't do anything that would act against the network, because in doing so, they would only hurt themselves. This is the reason why Bitcoin is able to operate in an open, decentralized, and permissionless environment. This is what makes it censorship resistant. This is what makes it borderless. This is what allows it to operate globally without any restrictions. And this is what protects it from attacks. Because any attempt to attack any individual portion or any individual part in Bitcoin will only result in harming the attacker. That doesn't sound like a useless puzzle to me. I probably should have warned you that if you get a short fuse, this video is probably going to trigger your inner rage demon. And it's for reasons such as this that I do think it is important that Bitcoin mining has a voice. We finally reached the point where Bitcoin now faces its next foe. And don't get me wrong, Bitcoin doesn't need to be defended. It will succeed regardless. But as I said, the genius of Bitcoin is that it plays on game theory. The strength of the network is dependent upon the reality that human beings will act, or at least the participants in Bitcoin will react in a self-serving manner. As long as everybody is behaving like that, Bitcoin gets stronger. Sometimes it can lead to messy results, but it does make Bitcoin even more resilient. And this even goes for governments of the world. So long as governments around the world respond to Bitcoin in a way that is self-serving, Bitcoin gets stronger. I know some of you are probably wondering exactly what I mean there. I intend to do an entire video covering that topic alone, but for now, let's just move on with this video.
The amount of computational power and energy for this is a disaster for our planet. Now, some crypto advocates claim that these environmental costs are worth it because of the security the proof of work validation process provides for the system. And you were talking about this is the security that's built in. But let me ask you, Professor Menand, do you think the environmental costs inflicted by cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin are worth whatever potential benefits they provide?
No, absolutely not, especially for countries like the United States, where the benefits of crypto are largely illusory. They're not a better means of payment. They undermine the government's ability to maintain robust economic growth over time. They circumvent important safeguards that we've been talking about that prevent extortion. And the environmental costs are very, very large. And so I think the cost-benefit analysis on Bitcoin is clear.
Now, I don't know who this guy is. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time defending Bitcoin based on those comments. But what he's basically saying here is that for the United States, the marginal improvement that Bitcoin might provide its citizens is not worth the environmental impact that Bitcoin's energy consumption has. Never mind the fact that Bitcoin's energy consumption actually only accounts for less than half of 1% of the world's global energy production. And for that half of 1%, we're provided with a global, decentralized monetary network that cannot be confiscated, cannot be censored, and provides people with the freedom to transact with anybody they choose, anytime they wish. And that doesn't even begin to account for the financial innovations that are being built on top of this, which will benefit and improve the lives of any single American who chooses to use it. It's entirely up to them whether they choose to use it or not.
All right. So let me ask you then, Professor Menand, what's the end game for Bitcoin? Will more and more miners keep doing more and more useless, complicated math problems that consume a larger and larger share of the world's energy for the next 100 years until the last coin is mined? What is the future of Bitcoin and the future of our planet?
I think a lot depends on how the people in this Zoom react. If governments like ours continue to sit on the sidelines while alternative currency systems develop, or even if they give succor to that development, we're going to see Bitcoin use continue to expand, because there's a growing group of people who would like to move sort of the whole financial system to decentralized ledgers. And that's going to mean more and more environmental damage. So Congress, I think, really needs to act here.
The people on this Zoom call need to act. This person believes that the people on that specific call have the power to decide what Bitcoin is and is not allowed to do. This is someone who definitely does not understand what this is. And I find it remarkable that this is coming from the United States of all places, the land of the free. He just described how, if left unchecked in a free and open market, that it would expand because the people who are using it want it. So they need to step in and hamper it, shut it down. What does that sound like to you?
And you have to worry. Like, if your government is setting up a system, they're not willing to use that system to compete on an equal basis on its merits, but instead have to pass a law that forces you to use that system and makes it illegal to use the competing system of open market economics. What the hell kind of government did you just elect? Like, at that point, you're beginning to wonder, what kind of government is this? Let's go through the words. Democracy, no. Public democracy, no. Constitutional democracy, police state, Fascism, totalitarianism. That's the kind of, okay, yeah.
Lucky for us, the people on that Zoom call don't get the final say.
Yeah. So as we think about how to build a better banking system, we need to rethink the use of environmentally wasteful cryptocurrencies. If I can, let me just get through these quickly. Dr. Narula, let me ask you, from the research you and your colleagues at MIT have done, is it possible to design a central bank digital currency that does not require miners to perform random number generation puzzles?
Yes, it is.
And could you design it so it wouldn't consume more energy than a middle-sized country?
Yes, you can.
And could we have a central bank digital currency that doesn't exacerbate the climate crisis and undermine environmental justice?
I think you could build a central bank digital currency which does not consume vast amounts of energy, yes.
Good. I'm glad to hear this. Look, cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin are terrible for the environment. And that would be true regardless of whether we were getting anything productive out of that energy usage or not. The fact that we're not makes it even more scandalous. One of the easiest and least disruptive things we can do to address the climate crisis is crack down on environmentally wasteful cryptocurrencies. And now is the time to do it.
Authority should derive from the consent of the governed, not from the threat of force.
Barbie is right. The consent of the governed. No amount of force from politicians like Elizabeth Warren is going to be able to shut down Bitcoin. Now, she mentioned central bank digital currencies and how with a use of some of the blockchain technologies out there, you could secure a blockchain without the need for this wasteful, useless puzzle solving that we call proof of work. What she's referring to is a private permissioned blockchain. And this would function in much the same way as a Bitcoin blockchain, except that the participants on that network, all the different nodes, would have to be vetted, would have to be permissioned. Not just anybody can join and verify transactions. They got to know who you are. You need to have the authority to be there. And a central authority would have to grant those permissions. This is a more efficient way of processing transactions. Problem is, we already have that. It's not innovative. It doesn't change anything about the system we currently employ. It's not borderless. It's not censorship resistant. It's not decentralized. And it is nowhere near as robust as a proof of work reinforced system, one that relies on human nature for its security. I did a little bit of research into private permissioned blockchains and some of the risks that those blockchains would be exposed to. I came across this article titled Attack Surface Analysis of Permissioned Blockchain Platforms for Smart Cities. This was a very well detailed, somewhat technical article that kind of walks you through the types of attacks that could be orchestrated against permissioned systems, ones that have these centralized authorities. Things like an insider threat. In the case of an insider threat, the holder of the administrator certificates is not to be trusted and has free reign over the blockchain. Basically, what they're saying is if an attacker got into the system, they would have complete and total control over the entire network. And if you think that the US government is fully capable of keeping attackers out, well, just ask WikiLeaks. We've seen time and time again, there isn't a single US government agency that hasn't been hacked. If you create a honeypot where all you have to do is attack one central source, once you're in, it is a very lucrative attack. By contrast with Bitcoin, any attack you attempt, the monetary value you would have to expend in order to conduct that attack would hurt you more than you would gain in any possible scenario. That is game theory. This article goes further, describing many other types of attacks: private key leakage, a central authority attack, DNS attack. At the end of the article, they provide some conclusions and future work. And one thing here that stood out to me, where they start talking about a piece of hardware called the Intel SGX technology, where they suggest that this type of hardware might help. However, they say considering the hardware cost involved, this solution is not a general proposal for all membership service scenarios. I had a little look into this particular hardware, and interestingly enough, it's found that this particular piece of hardware is vulnerable to an unfixable flaw that can steal crypto keys and more. Here's the thing. Anytime you put control of a distributed system in the hands of a single party, it will be compromised, either by the person with that control or by an outside attacker who manages to get inside. And so in this environment, how long do you think it is before somebody attacks one of these central bank issued digital currencies? The incentive to attack them is just too great. And there's very little to disincentivize anyone from doing it. Unfortunately, I suspect for many like Elizabeth Warren, there's very little one can say or do that would convince them that they need to look at this in a different way. The main issue here is she doesn't see the value that Bitcoin provides. Maybe she never will. But the reality is this argument about Bitcoin consuming too much energy isn't really the issue at hand. What they are saying is the energy that it's consuming is a waste because it doesn't provide any value, at least not to them. She clearly has no issue with expending energy on things that she perceives as having value. Bitcoin, as I've said before, is a very easy target because its energy consumption is very measurable. And as we know, how much energy is utilized in the traditional financial infrastructure with all the banks, brick and mortar, employees that have to travel to and from work, or other industries like transportation, say private jets, that don't exactly shuttle around a whole lot of people per trip, but expend a great deal of energy to do so. But hey, I don't have a problem with that. In a free and open market, if you're willing to pay the rate that the market demands to expend that energy to do work that you consider valuable, then you have every right to do that. And nobody should be able to stop you. That's a free and open marketplace. That is one of the fundamental pillars that America was built on.